I'm Nikki.
And I'm Jess.
She's the traumatized.
And she's the abandoned.
And welcome to our podcast, where we talk about true crime, spooky things, and everything in between.
And today we're going to be diving into some unsolved mysteries.
Heck,
I'm really excited.
yeah.
I've been wanting to do mine for so long. First, how was your week?
It was good. I don't think I did anything extraordinary.
You have in-laws coming.
We do. They're coming today because my husband's having surgery this coming week, so they're going to be here to help me.
That's going to be so nice. It's so nice that they can do that.
I'm going to get all the Bosnian food and send you all the pictures.
So jealous. I'm utterly jealous. Yeah, so my week
Yeah,
was good.
How was your week? How was your day then?
My day has been a day. It's been a day. Yeah, so I obviously have been trying to help out in editing and stuff like that. Plus I stream, like we both stream. And so when I originally got my computer, I just needed a computer. It's our first PC that we've ever purchased. And I thought I got a good deal on it. Then a couple months later, Tim wanted a PC. Actually, I don't know if Tim actually wanted a PC. I wanted Tim to game with us on a PC. So I was like, you're getting a PC. And he got a better processor. Now, 2 years later, a year later, you know, starting to edit. I'm starting to want to do more things with my stream and add stuff in. And my computer's like, it's dying. It is, when I say struggling, like doing the cave video, I think I sent you a clip of what it was struggling. The processor was maxed out. It was not doing well. And so Tim was like, he's wanted to switch our PCs for a couple months, and I'm just being stubborn. So finally we're like, fuck it, we're doing it. Right. So I was like, I get so nervous about new stuff, especially technology. It's like my weakness. So I did it. I was like, bite the bullet. So he had our PCs apart. He goes to put my capture card into his PC, and his motherboard doesn't have a slot for it. So there's that. And so I'm like, damn it to hell. So I was like, whatever. I'm just gonna. So I started looking. I looked at NZXT like PCs and stuff like that. I'm like, oh my god, they're so fucking expensive. But it's an investment, and like I really have been wanting a new computer for a while. I was just looking. I went on a couple different sites. I went on one site and I was like, oh, this is like a decent PC. So I'm like looking at it and I was like, oh, I could get it like finance 0% interest for 12 months. And I'm like, okay, this is actually probably doable, whatever. Tim's like, oh, what was the motherboard again? I was like, okay, cool. So I hit next, like trying to get off of the finance screen to like go back to see like the next was buying it. So I actually accidentally bought a PC this morning.
Oh my god. You canceled it, right?
I was like, Tim, I think I just bought it. He was
you where was the part where you put in your information?
That's the thing. I never put in my billing information, but I was doing it through like that's the thing. I thought I was just hitting next to go back to the screen to like, okay, where's your billing information? Like, here's the what. But there was no next screen. It was just like, oh, congratulations. I was like, what?
Oh my god, did you call and cancel?
So I talked to Tim and we're actually just gonna do it. So
well, does it have the right motherboard?
It does have the right motherboard.
Oh my good god. Anywho, fun fact of the day. Just bought a PC accidentally.
I'm struggling between buyer's remorse and being really excited about it. Okay, so fun fact of the day. Did you know hot water will turn into ice faster than cold water will?
Yes.
Maybe we should switch it up. Maybe you should do some fun facts, because the last two ones you've known. I haven't known any of these.
I literally grew up in North Dakota where it's negative 20 degrees for fun.
So do you know the science behind it?
No.
Do
you?
No.
Oh. Anyways, we would literally, when it got to like a certain temperature outside, we would get like a glass of hot water and just like walk outside and like throw it. And before it hits the ground, it's like slush.
That's so cool.
There's a reason why I moved out of North Dakota.
Anyway,
So,
okay.
Unsolved mysteries.
What are you telling me about today?
Picture me this. I picked out another like ship adventure to tell you about.
Ooh, I like
So,
ships. Okay.
I'm obsessed. It's fine.
Oh, here's the thing. I don't know. It's kind of late now. It's fall, guys, and I'm
It's
so
finally
excited.
fall. It's finally feeling fall. I can finally wear
Feeling fall.
long sleeve
Yes!
things.
I was like, get my hoodie.
Ah.
It's just snuggled with the blankets, and it's like they got that chill in the air, and I'm like, So the first day of fall was Thursday, I think. So I was like, yo, I'm living it up. I'm so excited.
I think we're fall girls.
I'm 1,010% a fall girl. That's why I got married in the
a
fall.
girl.
Anywho, so tell me about your unsolved mystery.
Okay, so what I'm going to be talking about today is Franklin's Lost Expedition.
Ooh, oh yeah. See, okay, I've never heard of this. Okay,
Yep.
are you talking about like Franklin? Like what Franklin?
Like not a Franklin, you know.
Oh, so no, like Franklin Roosevelt or like Benjamin Franklin?
No.
Okay.
Sir John Franklin. For almost 4 centuries, one quest had consumed some of Europe's most accomplished mariners. That quest was to locate and transit the fabled Northwest Passage, which is a long-sought pathway from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean through Canada's ice-strewn Arctic inlets. One of their main quests was to find a quicker way to get to the Pacific Ocean.
Right.
Hence why they found North America in the first place. But
we're here.
So they thought there was a pathway through Canadian inlets.
Okay.
Like all the little islands up there. It was a generations-spanning obsession that chipped away at European understanding of North America's high latitudes, sometimes at great cost to both vessels and lives. Which brings us to May 18th, 1845. 2 ships, HMS Erebus and HMS Terror, sailed from Britain to set out to accomplish this mission. Experienced explorer, Royal Naval Officer Sir John Franklin led this expedition along with 128 crew members. They would set sail that May Day in 1845, never to be seen again, and become one of history's greatest maritime mysteries. The end. I'm just kidding.
All right, I'm going to be talking about.
So we're going to go back a little bit and get a little bit of background for the beginning of the expedition. In 1804, Sir John Barrow took up the position as second secretary of the Admiralty of the United Kingdom. He inherited a legacy of European naval exploration that spanned back centuries. Barrow advocated for the discovery of a Northwest Passage over Canada, and over the decades, he sent many missions in an attempt to map out the Canadian Arctic.
So at this point, do they realize that Canada is there? Or obviously it wasn't Canada.
Yeah.
So they're trying to go above Canada?
Mm-hmm.
I see. Okay, got it.
One such explorer, a Royal Navy officer,
It's true.
Sir John Franklin, found himself on several of these expeditions. He had been on 3 expeditions previous to being selected to lead another expedition in 1845. But Franklin was actually not Barrow's first choice to lead this expedition. Barrow had approached 5 other individuals for the job before eventually settling on Franklin. And actually 2 of those men would go on this expedition with him. So the expedition was to be composed of 2 ships, HMS Erebus, which was built in 1826, and HMS Terror, which was built in 1813. Franklin was given command of the Erebus, and the Irish-born explorer and naval officer Francis Cozier was given command of the Terror. Cozier was actually one of the men that was approached before Franklin. A young naval officer, James Fitzjames, was appointed second in command of the Erebus. So on the Erebus, we've got Franklin and Fitzjames, and then on the Terror, we got Cozier. I hope I say that right. Like the men who was to lead the fateful expedition, the ships themselves were also well acquainted with the exploration of frigid waters. Each of the ships were fitted with reinforced bows for cutting through ice, and iron rudders that could be pulled into heavy iron wells if the situation was necessary. The Erebus and the Terror were also fitted with an internal steam heating system to keep the crews reasonably comfortable amid the harsh conditions in the Canadian Arctic. I think that in itself is pretty impressive that they had an internal heating system in 1845. Structurally, both ships were considered hardy cold weather vessels, so they were built for this. Okay, so I'm gonna go into a little bit of the provisions for the ships because it's kind of important down the line.
Yeah,
foreshadowing,
for sure.
But
so
some provisions for the ships: instead of settling for typical rations of salted pork and other dry foods, Franklin opted to contract Stephen Goldner, a provisioner with access to then state-of-the-art tinning technology, to prepare 8,000 tins of food meant to last for around 3 years.
So it's almost like canning, but with like aluminum. So it is like canning.
Yeah, it's like canning. They just called it like tins.
Tinning. Okay.
Of course, the ships started out with cattle, sheep, and pigs, and hens to be eaten in the early stages of the journey. A total of 7,088 pounds of tobacco was supplied to the ships to either be chewed or smoked in pipes. What else are they gonna do?
God, thinking about tobacco makes me cough. Anyway.
Also, the ship had been loaded with 2,700 pounds of candles to provide light during the long, dark winter months. The ships also featured a library of over 1,000 books for officers and crew to enjoy throughout their voyage. I thought that was really cool. And in fact, I have a fun fact also today.
Yay! I bet I don't know this one.
There were 3 pets aboard the Erebus. There was a monkey that Lady Franklin presented to the ship, an old Newfoundland dog called Neptune, and a cat. The monkey was an amusing but annoying thief. Neptune was very popular amongst the crew, and the cat was needed to catch rats. Don't ask me what happened to them, because I don't know, and we're going to pretend that they live happily ever after. The expedition set sail from Greenhithe, Kent, on the morning of May 9th, 1845. The ships first traveled to Stromness, Orkney Islands in northern Scotland, and then to Greenland. Upon reaching Greenland's Disco Bay, more provisions were gathered, and the crewmen on board the Terror and Erebus sent what would be their final letters to loved ones back home. Obviously, because they have no other, stop. They won't be sending letters from. The final sighting of the expedition by Europeans took place in late July 1845, when the whalers Prince of Wales and Enterprise spotted the Terror and Erebus in Baffin Bay, waiting for conditions to improve enough for safe passage across Lancaster Sound. After the encounter in Baffin Bay, they were never heard from again. 2 years would pass before anyone thought to go looking for them, because it was supposed to be like a 2-year expedition or longer.
Jeez. Okay.
Franklin's wife, which I spoke previously about with the monkey.
Yep.
Lady Jane Franklin, along with some members of Parliament and other influential entities, began to pressure the Admiralty to send out search parties for the missing men. In spring of 1848, the first overland search party was dispatched, marking the start of what would become a 150-year effort to discover the fate of the lost Franklin expedition. 32 separate expeditions took place between 1849 and 1859. In 1850, search expedition to Beachley Island turned up the first traces of the lost expedition. An abandoned camp where they spent the winter of 1845 to 46 was discovered, along with the graves of 3 men belonging to the Franklin expedition. In the years following, European and American search parties often turned to the local Inuit population for help locating the lost men. And they would sometimes have small possessions of the men, and more often than not, they had stories of foreigners starving to death along the coast. Unfortunately, a lot of those leads weren't followed up on. But on the 31st of March in 1854, Britain officially declared the crews of the Terror and the Erebus deceased and decided to dispatch no further search parties. Obviously, that happened in 1854. We know that more search parties went after that.
Right.
It was basically private expeditions, and I think Lady Franklin had even paid for some of those and what have you. But over the course of the next 30 years, news and relics such as tin cans, snow goggles, and cutlery filtered back to Britain, helping to piece together what happened to the expedition. This is kind of what they think happened. After spending the winter at Beachley Island, it is believed that in the spring they sailed south toward Peel Sound, but off the northernmost point of King William Island were trapped by the ice flow down the McClintock Channel. In the spring of 1847, a party from the expedition is said to have traveled across the ice to Point Victory on shore and deposited a written record of their progress. The message bore good news. The ship had wintered in 1846 at Beachley Island, and this part is in quotations, Sir John Franklin commanding the expedition, all well. It was thought they reached Cape Herschel on the south coast of the island, filling in the unexplored part of the Northwest Passage, but a second message was then found, often known as the Victory Point Note. So this message was dated April 25th, 1848. And it was actually, the message was written in the margins of a standard Admiralty form. It was a handwritten message that stated 24 of the expedition members, including Franklin, had died by June 11th, 1847, a mere 2 weeks after the first message had been written. Having been stuck in the ice since September 12th, 1846, Erebus and the Terror drifted south until Captain Kozer ordered abandonment in April 1848. So the ships, if you guys are all tracking with me, were stuck in the ice for 2 years. Weakened by starvation and scurvy, 105 surviving men headed south toward Back River. And that is the last information we have from the crew themselves. Just as a side note, I didn't really know what scurvy was, so I looked it up. And scurvy is a disease caused by lack of vitamin C. Because obviously on ships you can't have fresh fruit and whatnot. And it's characterized by like spongy gums, loosening of teeth, and bleeding into the skin and mucous membranes. But that is not the end of my story, because a lot has been found over the years. So as the years and decades dragged on, more and more traces of the Franklin expedition were uncovered. Additional grave sites, relics, and oral testimonies of the local Inuit population painted a bleak picture of starvation, sickness, and desperation. Archaeological excavations and exhumations at Beachley Island and King William Island in the 1880s and 1990s only solidified the tragic fate of the Franklin expedition. Vitamin C deficiency ultimately leading to scurvy was detected in the remains of many of the men. The skeletal patterns commonly found in cases of cannibalism were noted on several bones unearthed at the gravesites as well. It was found that the amount of lead in the bones of some of the men was exponentially high, leading to the theory that lead poisoning may have been one of the factors contributing to the expedition's demise as well. Do you remember when I was talking about the provisions being in tin cans? It was supposed that the expedition's tin food, hailed as cutting-edge technology and stocked in abundance, had been contaminated by lead solder used to seal the tins and was most likely the culprit. The whole thing was basically when he ordered the provisions, he really didn't give them time to do it properly, so cut corners, and what happens when you cut corners?
People die.
People die.
people die.
Examination of tissues collected from 3 remarkably well-preserved crewmen who had died and were buried during the expedition's first winter. So you remember when I was talking about they found 3 grave sites?
Yep.
Those bodies were actually well-preserved, and they were able to examine the tissues on them. It reaffirmed the theory that lead poisoning was one of the factors leading to the expedition's destruction. Evidence of pneumonia, tuberculosis, and Pott's disease also were noticed in some of the remains. Though many discoveries had been made over the years, the 2 main pieces of the puzzle, the ships, were nowhere to be found. Well, that changed in September 2014.
Ooh.
When the Erebus was discovered by Hat Island near King William Island in just 36 feet of water. And 2 years later, in September 2016, almost to the day, the Terror was discovered in 79 feet of water just south of King William Island. Archaeologists exploring the shipwrecks of the HMS Erebus and Terror have recovered over 350 objects from the lost Franklin expedition. It is careful, painstaking work in challenging and remote environment, working with the Inuit Heritage Trust and local people to protect and reveal things that have lain undisturbed for 175 years. While the exact narrative of the Franklin expedition is lost to history, over a century of dedication to the historical record has allowed us a glimpse at what the hardships these 129 souls faced in their quest. The officers and crews battled against freezing temperatures, malnutrition, disease, lead poisoning, and even cannibalism before eventually succumbing to the odds. Thanks to the perseverance of countless explorers, local Inuit groups, and archaeologists, maybe one day we will have a full picture of what happened to these poor men. That's my story.
Holy hell, that's crazy.
Also, like, if the people had actually listened to the Inuits in the first place, they probably would have found them a lot sooner. Because, like,
yep.
The ships and, like, the bodies, everything was where the Inuits had told them that they would be.
All right, my turn?
Your turn.
So I am going to be doing the Ditlov Pass, which is one that a lot of people have heard of, but hopefully I'll be telling a little more detailed story because I'm excited.
I'm intrigued to see what theory you think is the best.
There's so many, and I have like pros and cons for each. So I'm going to be going into the Ditlov Pass, which is often referred to as Russia's greatest mystery. So for those of you who have heard of this is the information that you might already know, but we're going to dive into it because I freaking love it. It's so interesting to me. Okay. In 1959, after failing to report back, 9 students were found frozen to death in subpolar conditions. They say what makes this case stand out from other strange disappearances is that this was extremely well documented. Like, the actual trip was very well documented. There was a reported criminal case. There are tons of pictures and diaries. And there are still witnesses alive that were part of the rescue team. So this is like an ongoing investigation.
Ongoing. I did that in quotation marks for listeners.
So we're going to go right into the conspiracy theories because I want to touch base on that criminal case. Apparently, the criminal case had begun before the hikers were even reported missing.
What does that mean?
On the front of the criminal case, it was dated for February 6th, 1959. But the hikers were not due back until at very earliest on the 12th. So the criminal case was dated 6 days before the hikers were even reported missing.
They know. And I know they know.
So obviously then people come back and they're like, well, this is just so. Some people say this is a clerical error because the document in the case file that was noted from March also had the date of February 6th on it. So they're saying, okay, maybe they're both incorrect. Maybe this February 6th date was just made up. That's the rebuttal, is like, well, the document in the case file was dated incorrect. So the whole thing is dated incorrect. Or.
Or
So using those photos and diaries found, this is what we know so far about what happened to the expedition. In January 1959, a group of 10 young hikers led by leader Igor Ditlov began this expedition into the Ural Mountains. Igor was considered to be the most experienced member of the explorers. He lived for adventures. That documentary that I watched, it goes into such detail about each individual explorer. It goes into their history. It's so cool. Like, I would definitely recommend giving it a watch, but just because as long as this interests you as much as it interests me, I would definitely check it out. So Igor Ditlov being, okay, that's what the pass is named after. 9 of the group were all students at the European Technical University. So they all knew each other. They all had gone exploring together. Zina Kolmogrova was known to have such a bright personality. She was in almost all of the pictures that were taken. She was like the bubbly one of the group. Now, there are some speculation that Igor was really involved with Zina, as her picture was found in his pocket by his heart. However, according to Zina's diary, she liked another guy in their group.
Oh my god.
Yuri Durashekna.
I didn't know we were coming for some tea.
Yes, we are here for tea, everyone. Buckle up. That is actually not one of the ones I'm going to dive into, but another conspiracy is that tensions arose because there was
lovers quarrel.
So there's that love triangle just going on in there. So Igor was the leader too. So the only person who wasn't previously known to the rest of the group was 37-year-old Semyon Zolotiero. He had actually requested to join the expedition just weeks before they departed because he was working towards a promotion for his job and only needed one more expedition to achieve that next level and to get this promotion as like a person who could take people on tours and stuff.
He's actually a lot older than the rest of them.
Yes. So all of the other ones were in a European technical university.
Like
they were like college. Yeah. They were like college age. He was 37 years old, but the group welcomed him with open arms. Even though there was that age difference, they all got along really well.
That's good.
And all the diaries, they were like, "Oh, he's just like part of the group," you know.
I didn't know that fact.
I'm hoping I can give you some new facts because I do know this is like a very well-known conspiracy theory. Anyhow, now we're on to January 23rd. It was written in the diary of Ludmila that this was their last day of preparations. They were getting ready to go. They were all issued their route book and took off on a train. Quick, not so fun fact. As I mentioned before, there were 10 people who set out on this expedition, but only 9 passed away. So Yuri Yudin would be the only hiker to return alive from this trip. He actually had to quit the trip due to a back injury that flared up. So as one can expect, he had extreme survivor's guilt. It was literally the one stop before everyone ended up disappearing.
Like the last stop of civilization, right?
Yeah.
Like the last little load up or whatever.
And his back really was hurting him and he just couldn't go on. And so he was like, I'll just catch you guys up when you finish it. We'll just keep going up. And then, yeah. 10 days into their journey, and the team reaches the peak known to the locals as Dead Mountain.
Maybe not go to that mountain. That's not a mountain I want to go to.
No, like that to me is very foreboding. Yeah. Surprise, surprise. It was at this point something goes terribly wrong. For reasons still unknown to this day, in the middle of the night, the hikers cut their way out of their tent. Tracks then showed they fled down the mountain in freezing conditions without any winter gear on. The way it was described when I was first like understanding all this is like they didn't just leave their tent, they cut their way out of the tent.
Yeah, because like they obviously saw the cuts, but it wasn't until they looked closer that they realized the cuts came from the inside and outside. It's insane. Like, makes no sense.
Weeks after they were due to report back, search parties were sent out, and this is the gruesome scene that they found. The hiking party was found more than a mile away from their shredded tent. without their winter clothes, and the search party at this time stated there was no clear sign of an avalanche or a natural disaster. So the initial report stated there was no sign of an avalanche or a natural disaster. There are ways to like look at the snow drifts, at the damages and stuff like that. That's important. In fact, in that picture that I showed you, the original hiking team had put their skis up in the snow, like up standing forward. And in that picture, they're still standing upright and undisturbed. Literally, if there was an avalanche, they would not be there anymore. Like they would be gone. There were, however, mysterious lights seen prior to the accident. And then the mountain was suddenly swarmed by Russian KGB, and they took over the entire investigation.
Because that's not suspicious at all.
So once they found the tent, the mountain had been swarmed by the KGB, and they took over the investigation. They said it's super important that we take over this. And the mysterious lights had been seen prior that night before. So don't know what those were. After the group's bodies were discovered, it was determined that 6 had died from hypothermia, while the other 3 had been killed by physical trauma. Obviously, the hypothermia is like they ran out of their tent without any clothes on. Like they had bare minimum clothes on. It was freezing outside. Obviously, they're going to die from hypothermia. However, what's super interesting is the physical trauma. So one victim had a major skull damage. 2 had severe chest trauma. And another one actually had a small crack in his skull. So 4 of the bodies were found lying in running water in a creek. 3 of these 4 had damaged soft tissue of the head and face. 2 of the bodies were missing eyes, and 1 was missing a tongue, and 1 was missing eyebrows.
What? Eyebrows?
Eyebrows were gone.
I just wasn't. I'm sorry for laughing. I wasn't expecting eyebrows.
Eyebrows.
To be gone.
The investigation concluded that a quote unquote compelling natural force had caused the deaths, and the Soviet government closed the case and sealed the records.
'Cause that's not suspicious at all.
Case closed, sealed records, nobody can access them. What? Excuse you? It is a known fact that some of the materials and evidence were removed from this case. And we're going to talk about some theories now. We're just going to go point by point. So obviously the first one's aliens. Obviously.
Okay, I give this theory, without even hearing anything, a 2 out of 10.
Let's rate the theories. Oh my God, I love this game. Okay. Truly, you know me. I love aliens, but this is the weakest theory.
Yeah.
I had to throw it out there because it's a common one. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but aliens, because there were weird glowing lights. Animal attacks, okay, or some people believe it was the Russian Yeti. They get scared, they get spooked, they cut their way out of the tent with a knife, and then they run from something. It might explain, it doesn't really explain.
Okay, so I'm gonna give this one like a 4 or 5 out of 10, because animals like eating like the eyes and the tongue and the eyebrows like makes sense,
right?
But like,
why not anything else?
Exactly. So like
a Yeti could cause skull fractures, though.
I mean,
yeah, I think it's a fair rating too, because the body parts being missing is weird. That's weird to me. That's something that's definitely like strange.
Well, that's definitely something like that animals do eat, is like they would go for like the softer, because like your eyes are inside, your tongue is inside, so they're probably like one of the last things to freeze. So scavenger animals or what have you could definitely go for those.
A thought too is that, you know, people just went crazy and they started cutting things out, and Okay, big one, hypothermia. It was the known cause for 4 of them. When you start to get so cold, your body actually reverts and feels like you're really, really hot. So people, weirdly enough, when they are struggling with hypothermia, sometimes will literally strip off their clothes because they feel like they're burning up, which would make sense why they left their winter clothes in the tent, stumbled their way into the winter weather and got lost and just couldn't find their way back. So then they actually froze to death.
Well, because also the Yuris that were found together, they were actually like in their underwear at that point when they were found. They had like stripped all their clothes
literally
off.
Nothing. Mm-hmm.
Honestly, that one's like a 7 out of 10. Mm-hmm. But like, where did all the extra injuries come from? You know what I mean?
So that's a big one. Kind of going into that, people were like, oh, well, an avalanche could have caused the skull fractures.
But there's no evidence of an avalanche.
So, side note about the avalanche, Russia actually ended up opening up a new investigation in 2019.
Okay.
And now its conclusions, presented in July of 2020, was that an avalanche had led to their deaths. So now they have updated the initial ruling to it have being an avalanche.
What was our evidence?
Their working theory is that the survivors of the avalanche have been forced to suddenly leave their camp in low visibility conditions with inadequate clothing and had died of hypothermia. That is their theory.
But that's a theory. Did they have evidence?
So a study led by scientists from EPFL and ETH Zurich, published in 2021, suggested that a type of avalanche known as a slab avalanche could explain some of the Trek's injuries. However, a couple people of the initial search team, not the KGB people, the initial search team had experience in avalanches, and they interviewed them in this documentary, and they were like, there is no history for avalanches in this area. There were no conditions for the avalanche. And the ski poles were literally standing up straight. Like, things literally get taken over, covered up. They weren't taken down. They weren't covered up. Like, it.
Well, if there was an avalanche, you probably would have taken longer to find the tent in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Because it would have been covered in snow, and so
it's literally like it was like the bodies in the tent were just covered in recent snowfall. It wasn't like
an avalanche
snow, and like the incline that they were on was not that steep in the first place.
There were no conditions for the avalanche. There was no history of an avalanche happening there.
I give that theory a 5 out of 10.
The initial rescue party really was just like, this is literally, people will not let this go. So the Russian government is like, okay, we have to come up with a more serious theory. Okay, it's an avalanche. Was it? I don't think so. Why would they be missing body parts if it was an avalanche?
If they can give me more solid evidence that it was an avalanche, then I'd be able to believe. But if you're just telling me it was an avalanche without anything, back yourself up.
Yeah.
No. Sorry. No. Next.
So next is, I'd never heard of this, Katabatic Wins. Have you ever heard of a katabatic wind?
No.
So apparently, katabatic winds can rush down elevated slopes at hurricane speeds. Most are not that intense. Many are more like 10 knots, which is like 18 kilometers per hour or less. But they can produce a sound that literally drives people insane. And it drives people to do crazy things, like run outside in freezing weather without clothes or cut out tongues. So that's one. I mean, there's no like documented things that people have done those things because of katabatic winds, but it is not a huge leap to say they didn't just go crazy because they heard these winds and
what, they would just like beat each other up.
It's kind of like, you know, the brown noise. Like, there's a gray noise, a brown noise that makes you like do things. Yeah, that just drives people crazy.
I mean, I give that a 3 out of 10. I just don't know.
So in like with that is the infrasound induced panic, which can be created by the katabatic winds. And British scientists have shown in a controlled experiment that extreme bass sounds known as infrasound produces a range of bizarre effects, including anxiety, extreme sorrow, and chills. So there is actual study done proving that infrasound induced panic is a thing.
I'll bump it up to 6 out of 10 then.
Finally,
Okay.
This is the one I believe. Military involvement.
Yeah. 10 out of 10.
And this comes from biggest key of this, which is you see the lights. Obviously, the KGB swarming, the fact that the case was closed, locked tight, nobody could get into it. One of the biggest ones that the documentary used was that it was pointed out in the last picture taken by one of the hikers that there was a very bright light in that picture. It is confirmed by experts that it's not just a solar flare, just a flare up in the camera. It's a real shot. It's just out of focus. The guy photographed a falling object flying at a high speed, so high that it did not have time to focus. Not only that, but they found the camera around Zolotarov's neck when they dug him out of the snow. So he had the camera on him when he was dug out of the snow. So it's theorized that there could have been some testing that was being done on this mountain. They saw it. They were affected by it. Some people believe radiation poisoning was a huge factor. However, that has been disproved recently because they actually didn't have any radiation.
Well, there's no radiation in the whole area, I don't think, right?
Right. So that was because that was a really big theory, was radiation testing. Well, they've recently disproved that because there really just wasn't any radiation found. But now we're at some sort of testing. Or it could be a combination of all of these factors. Not all of them, but a lot of them, you know. It could have been the Katabatic Winds drove them crazy to run out of tents. They got lost. They couldn't find their tent, so they started suffering from hypothermia, and then an animal came by and ate their tongue. You know, it could be a lot of different things, or it could just be the government covering up stuff very well, not so well.
Because this happened in the 60s, right? This is when
so this is 1959. Yeah,
so this is basically leading up to like the space race and the Cold War, nuclear weapons and all of that. Like, it's not that hard,
it's not,
to imagine that they were doing testing and they just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. But also, if a mountain is called Dead Man, maybe not go to that mountain.
Maybe not do that.
Personal opinion, I think it was a combination of the government. Maybe what they were testing caused the winds to happen.
Maybe, yeah.
And then, or if they were testing like if you said like an object fell and they're just a shock wave, not necessarily like a radiation, but like a pressure wave came.
Yeah.
You know, and that's how you explain the injuries.
So this is a case that has not and may never be actually solved, which is upsetting. I want to end it on a really sad note, so I'm sorry. Ditlov and his team were commemorated in the Ekaterinburg cemetery. And, you know, so Yuri Yudin was the 10th member who had turned home. He literally lived his entire life with survivor's guilt, really tried to figure out whatever happened to them. Once he did pass away years later, he asked to be buried with his friends so that he could finally join them in the afterlife. And he was buried next to them.
That's so sweet.
He was like, he really did have that like survivor's guilt.
Yeah.
So that's the story of Ditlov Pass and the conspiracy theories around it. And like I said, people are still investigating it. I mean, they still have like groups that are trying to figure out what the heck happened. But
yeah.
So yeah, guys, that's it for this episode. If you enjoy the podcast, don't forget to follow us. Leave a comment. Let us know if you like what we're doing. If you have things to say about it, just try to be nice because we're sensitive creatures. If you're watching on YouTube, hello, hi. Please like and subscribe because it's exciting when we get new subscribers and likes, and it helps us grow, and it's really cool.
Also, if you have any suggestions, let us know what you want us to talk about.
No, please. You can also find us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok with our username TTATA Podcast, where we post our updates and when we go live. When our episodes go live. We don't go live. Our episodes go live. Thanks for listening as usual. Next week, we're going to be covering abandoned places. I got my abandoned place.
I maybe have my...
Have I done any research on it?
No.
So I might not have it, but I have an idea of what I want to do. So we'll see. With that, we're going to leave you with this inspirational quote.
That's my cue.
That is you.
Okay, so success is liking yourself, liking what you do, and liking how you do it. Maya Angelou.
Ooh, that's good. I love your inspirational quotes. They inspire me.
That's the point of this.
That's why we're here. Anyways, guys, until next week. Bye.
Bye.